We turn back now to the Vatican, where we are following the ongoing story regarding the death of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. Benedict's health had reportedly been in decline for years. He was 95 years old. To tell us more about his legacy, let's bring in Candida Moss. She is an Edward Cadbury Professor of Theology at the University of Birmingham in the UK. It's good to have you with us. Let's talk just first about what stands out about Benedict. It seems that he will be best remembered for resigning from the papacy. Is that a fair assessment? And explain why his retirement is so significant.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Of all of the things that he accomplished, it's probably his resignation that he's going to be best known for. And that's because it was a really radical gesture. For a pope to say, I don't have the physical resources to do this anymore, I'm going to step down and make way for a successor, this was revolutionary. It was very modern, and it sort of kind of pulled back the curtain in front of the papacy and said, yes, it's a vocation, but it's also a job that's physically demanding. And in many ways, he might be the man that really moves the papacy into the 21st century.
Well, as a cardinal, he was known as Gods Rottweiler. Why was he given that moniker, and why did he dislike it?
Well, I don't think most people like being compared to dogs, but for Cardinal Ratzinger, as he was known then, he headed up the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith for 24 years. He was asked to do this by his predecessor, John Paul II. And in doing so, he took all of his kind of theological energies and dedicated them to kind of purifying the church. He had become disillusioned in the wake of Vatican II. And so he decided to sort of get rid of dissenting priests and nuns. He would silence them, especially those who had dedicated time and energy to supporting LGBT Catholics. And he had really pursued this kind of hardline conservative policy of traditional Catholic doctrines and purity on issues like abortion, contraception, whether or not priests could marry, women priests, and so on. And it's that ferocity that really earned him that nickname.
The Catholic Church is not known for being a progressive institution, but on both sides of Pope Benedict were more progressive popes. Pope John Paul II, who he followed into the papacy, was by most accounts more warmly regarded, especially in terms of being an international peacemaker. Tell us, how did Benedict feel following in his footsteps, and then about Pope Francis that followed him?
Yeah, I think this was quite challenging for Benedict because John Paul II, he was known as a peacemaker. He was instrumental in building bridges between the Soviet Union and the West, and he was enormously charismatic and charming. He seems like a true extrovert. And Francis does too. He's warm, he's inviting, he loves being out there with the people, even now that he's sick and his energies are flagging. But Benedict was a university professor. He was shy. He loved his books, he said, most of all. And for him, becoming Pope, I know they all say this, was a real burden because it meant that he had to be out there in front of people all the time. He loved ideas. He had been looking forward to retiring, and now he's really in the public spotlight. Where he really kind of bonded with John Paul II and can be seen as continuing his legacy is on issues like the importance of the family, the spirit of the gospel, and then sort of more socially conservative issues like contraception and abortion and attitudes to homosexuality. So there he saw himself definitely as sort of John Paul II's right-hand man, but then when he became Pope, is really kind of continuing the legacy of John Paul II's encyclical Humanae Vitae. With Francis, they publicly got along really well and said really nice things about each other, but Francis seems a lot more socially progressive.
Yes. And that was the follow-up question I was going to ask you in the last moments that remain. There was much made initially about the fact that there was going to be a former Pope still there at the Vatican, even though he handed the reins over to, as you said, Pope Francis, who is more socially progressive. In any way, do you think that in Pope Francis's days in the papacy now, that he might continue to send the Catholic Church in a more progressive path?
I think that for Francis moving forward, he has greater freedom. There have been conservative Catholics who have seen Benedict as sort of their figurehead, a kind of shadow pope that they could look to for leadership. And now that Benedict has sadly passed away, I think for Francis, he can move in a stronger direction. He doesn't have to worry about a kind of rival figure, whether or not Benedict wanted that for himself. That's what he was to many people. And also Francis himself can now continue to think about the prospect of retirement. He always thought this was a good plan, or that there should be sort of regulations in place to govern this previously unprecedented situation. But I think now Francis has more freedom to make more progressive moves, to act more decisively, and to contemplate his own retirement.
All right, Candida Moss, thank you.
Thank you.